Did you see the red carpet that the king was given last year when he came? How disgraceful was that? I mean, I cried tears, and my children were wondering. I said, this is the greatest insult of the whole of my life. That we can be able to roll out a red carpet for the king who colonized us, yet we do not want to know where Dedan Kimathi Washiori is buried. Because if he's buried in Nyeri, or in Taita Taveta, or in Uhuru Park, that becomes a shrine. And it reignites and unites the Gen Zs to stand up for their country. That is why they can't do that.
I feel like when you talk about Kenya, I like what you said. You said that the problem with Kenya is not the political class. It's not Ruto. It's not Raila. It's not Uhuru, Kibaki, Moi, Kenyatta. The problem is colonialism, is the Imperial British East African Company. And these guys are just a branch of this tree of colonialism. Rina, if you misdiagnose the disease, you are going to prescribe the wrong medication. Currently, in the Kenyan context, I see propositions, I see the medication that is being prescribed. And it is faulty because it is based on the wrong diagnosis of what the Kenyan problem is. William Ruto, Uhuru Kenyatta, Mwai Kibaki, in the political class, as it were, even Moi is the one who jailed me 19 times. I remember. You really fought his regime, huh?
Moi is the one who jailed me 18 times and Mwai Kibaki once. Actually, twice. Mwai Kibaki was twice. So that it was 17 times Moi and 2 times. But even then, I understood very clearly that Arap Moi and Mwai Kibaki are nyaparas. Okay. That's a Kiswahili word, which means that they are just enforcers of the imperialist capitalist system, global imperialist capitalist system. If I can take a minute on that to explain it, is that they are in the global imperialist capitalist system, there's what we call the core of capitalism, and then there's the periphery of capitalism. So we are in the periphery of capitalism, and there's the core of capitalism. Okay. So the way the world works is that value moves from the periphery to the core. And that is how Kenya and East Africa was established. It was established as a company, the Imperial British East Africa Company. And so in 1920, that company took a colonial political format. That's when Kenya became a colony in 1920. And so the state was established to facilitate the movement of value from the periphery to the core of capitalism. So that the people who are in power in Nairobi, in Kenya, are nyaparas. They are facilitators of value moving from the periphery to the core of capitalism. Okay. If you fail to understand that, then you will find yourself having the kind of petty conversations that are happening in Kenya that, the Luos have been marginalized, the Kikuyus are the ones who are the problem, the Kalenjins are the ones who are whatever, and their leader, William Ruto, is the problem. William Ruto, Uhuru Kenyatta, Mwai Kibaki, Arap Moi, Jomo Kenyatta, are all mere facilitators. And that's where we've spoken about the first liberation, the second liberation, and now the conversation around the third liberation. If you do not understand that the first liberation failed.
Yes, it did.
It was a false liberation. We were just given flag independence. But everything in terms of economic and political power remained with Britain and with the imperial powers, which are led by the United States of America. So we are what we call in political economy, we are a client state, which has over time, under Uhuru and Moi and Ruto, a client state that has become a slave queen state. A slave queen state. You see, a client state is paid to do a certain job. But a slave queen state is paid by everybody else. So it's China, it's Russia, it is so-and-so, it is America, it is Britain. We've now become a proper slave queen state. So we don't even have our sovereignty. We don't have independence. We don't have an economy. And we do not own anything that we call Kenyan. And so to start believing that the mere removal of William Ruto, which we have to do anyway, it's important that we remove William Ruto so that we can be able to have somebody who understands what the problem is and somebody who's helping Kenyans to actually solve the problem. William Ruto is part of the problem and is not helping it. Is an enabler of the continuation of the imperial, neo-colonial and the neoliberal capture of the Kenyan state and economy. So William Ruto is a problem in that sense. He's a facilitator, he's an enabler, but he's not the problem. He's not the problem. So Kenyans have to unite to address the problem, which is that our first liberation failed. That is why we still do not know where Dedan Kimathi Washori is buried. In a country that claims to be independent, 7 decades later, we don't know where Dedan Kimathi, the leader of the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, is buried. But the British Army, which Dedan Kimathi was fighting, is still in Kenya and occupies Karen, occupies Isiolo, occupies Nanyuki, occupies northern Kenya, Samburu, all these places. So what independence is that? When we have American bases all over Kenya, from Wajir to Manda to everywhere, including Nairobi. The British are in Nanyuki. They didn't go anywhere. So even who becomes president in Kenya is determined not by Kenyans, and we keep lying to ourselves that we are the ones who determine who becomes the Kenyan president. If the vote is the one which determines who gets to become president, how come Raila was not allowed to become president in 2007? He was not allowed. The only 2 countries that congratulated Mwai Kibaki that he has won the election was only the United States of America and Uganda.
Interesting.
The rest of the world knew that that election
was a sham.
Was rigged, you know. So these presidents that are even vying here, do they know that who becomes president of Kenya is determined outside Kenya? And so you see people saying that, it's the Kikuyus who denied Raila power.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so petty because it is ignorant. It is not the Kikuyu who denied Raila power. It is the one determining who should become Kenyan president who decide. So in 2022, the Americans and the British decided that they must get a president who moves Kenya away from the Chinese orientation. In the current global structure of BRICS and everything else, they said that they must get a president who is going to return Kenya to the orbit of the Western imperialist fulcrum. Why? Because Mwai Kibaki came to power in 2002. He was the only president who was not determined by the imperial powers. The imperial powers were working with Moi to get Uhuru to power.
And they failed.
And then Kenyans ganged in October, very late in the year, and formed the National Rainbow Coalition, supported Mwai Kibaki. Even before the imperial powers would get a space, President Mwai Kibaki had been elected by such a huge margin. And that is why the policies of Mwai Kibaki in the first 5 years were anti-imperialism. He did not borrow from the IMF and the World Bank, and they focused on mobilizing domestic resources, offering free primary education, which is against the World Bank prescriptions, supporting low-interest financial access to businesses, and that's how the economy was re-engineered under Mwai Kibaki, because they didn't have a say in terms of what policies were being, and that was very short-lived, very, very short-lived. Soon, they realized that if we allow this to continue, we are going to lose. So 20 years of that looking east while holding the relationship with the West disturbed them. Chinese imports to Kenya in 2002 were 6%. Chinese imports to Kenya were only 6%. By 2022, which is 20 years later, they had grown from 6% to 23%. Wow. Nearly a quarter of everything that was being imported to Kenya was Chinese. This is the problem that America and Britain had with the Uhuru and the Mwai Kibaki leadership for making the fulcrum to move east and cooperating with China and doing infrastructure, doing a lot of these things. They were not comfortable with that. So they said the end of the looking east has to come now. And their candidate was, Samoei Arap Ruto. And they invested everything to ensure that was possible, including how they manipulated the elections. So we are moving into another election in 17 months. And the conversation is that, Kikuyus did this, Luos did this, and so did this. This is a lie. We know that Raila was voted for. He was elected in 2022. But he was not allowed to become president. So how do we change how do we solve the problem if the wrong diagnosis is what is currently happening? And so I want to conclude that by saying that there are these what we call anchor states that the West has, Nigeria there, Kenya here, they are trying to, they have lost South Africa.
They have lost South Africa completely.
They have lost South Africa. Egypt is to our north, etc. Their idea, and Condoleezza Rice told us this to our faces in 2008. She told us to our faces, 6 of us from civil society were meeting her. And she told us that Kenya is too important to be left to Kenyans alone. Kenya is too important to be left to Kenyans alone.
I remember the ambassador the other day said that everything we do in Africa, we first do it in Kenya.
Exactly.
That's what I've been saying. Kenya is a very westernized country.
Extremely. I mean, in every sense. We have moved from being a client state to a slave queen state. We are a vassal country. Here, everything from our education to our economy to our... You saw the finance bill 2024 when Ruto was massacring, the Gen Zs. The finance bill was written at Treasury building by IMF and American congressmen and the businessmen were at the lobby of Parliament to ensure that the finance bill passes as it had been prescribed. So William Ruto is just a figurehead here, who is being given helicopters and armored personnel vehicles to murder Kenyans to ensure that Kenya remains a vassal neo-colonial state, which I normally describe as a railway line state and a railway line economy, which only serves external interests and not Kenyans, as it were. That's why we can't be allowed to industrialize this country. That's why we can't be allowed to use our land and natural resources for our benefit. Americans are here. They have taken all the minerals with the British because they are the ones who know where the minerals are. the British concluded the mineral exploration in this country in 1949.
Mm-hmm.
And once they knew where all the minerals were, they created national reserves, game parks, and all those kinds of things, so that they can now come in as conservancy experts in Nanyuki, in Marsabit, in Isiolo, in Naivasha, in Voi, in all those places. So they know this is where the resources are. So they created these mbuga za wanyama, which is basically the conservancies and the national parks and all those kinds of things. And they are the ones who are still exploiting those resources 7 decades after so-called independence of 1963. So Kenya is actually the country that must end neo-colonialism if Africa is going to be liberated. Because Kenya is one among the 4 only countries in Africa that experienced what we call settler colonialism.
Okay.
Not every country faced settler colonialism. It's only 4 countries that faced settler colonialism. And I'm going to tell you what that is. So it was Algeria, it was Kenya, it was Zimbabwe, it was South Africa.
Okay.
The British and the French were not planning to leave Kenya. They were not planning to leave Zimbabwe. They were not planning to leave South Africa. The French were not planning to leave Algeria. So in these 4 countries, we had to do armed struggle to remove the colonial powers.
Yeah.
That is not what was happening in Nigeria, in Tanzania, in Uganda. These were what we call administrative colonies. Administrative colonies. So ending colonialism in those countries was very easy because they only were administrative colonies. But for Kenya, Algeria, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, there was no plan of leaving at all. So they were not planning to leave Kenya. That's why they call it White Highlands, built the railway to expropriate all these resources. And so when you lack this basic political knowledge of what country you are living in, then you see people campaigning on the basis of tribes. Oh, it's the turn of this tribe to do this tribe. That is not the issue with Kenya. No tribe can fix the problem if we are not united as the people of Kenya to actually address the problem, which is, number 1, establish our sovereignty.
Yes. Good.
Number 2, build a developmental democratic state. Number 3, ensure that the democracy builds institutions that serve the people of Kenya. And number 4, use Kenyan resources to actually invest in the people of Kenya. Okay. Those 4 things do not exist in this country. So all these musical chairs that you are seeing all over this place are just that. They are musical chairs.
Do you feel like opposition is just another example of musical chairs like you see?
They are. But you see what we did in 2002, and I was at the core of it, if I can just take a minute on that, is that we understand the problem. So we said, instead of leaving this to the British and the Americans to decide for us, why don't we create an opposition alliance and get them to power with our money so that the British are not the ones who are paying for the election of these guys. That's what we did with Kibaki. And so you saw that we had a chance to do a few things for a very short while. The window was very short. So that's what we want to try this time round. If you can be able to bring an alliance of Kenyans, and then they are not influenced in terms of who becomes president, you can be able to get a few things done within that short window before the British and the Americans. Maybe I should not be saying every detail about the strategy. So basically we are saying the people in the opposition, by themselves, they actually do not understand what the problem is.
They don't.
Because they are part of it.
Yeah.
Just like Mwai Kibaki was part of the problem. But what we did is that we installed him with our votes and our money, and because of that, he was beholden to us. So Kenyans must be able to raise money quickly. Are you following what I'm saying?
I am.
They must raise money quickly and install their candidate before the British decide for us and the Americans. Because if they are going to decide for us next year, they might want to retain Ruto. Because he's very good for them.
Not even might. That's what they are planning to do.
That's what they are planning.
Yeah.
Ruto has been excellent for the foreign powers.
Yeah.
In every sense. So if we allow them to continue with their strategy, we are the losers. So we have to cobble up a strategy where we quickly, across the 47 counties and the 290 constituencies, create structures, people structures, which then get our own president, who we can be able to dictate a few things to before the state is again recaptured.
Yeah.
Because the capture-recapture window happens very quickly. Those guys are not sleeping. The moment they realize that they have lost a bit of mileage, they cause a lot of trouble. They even finance instability and everything else, so that you bow back to their whims and the demands. So we are in a continuous struggle. It's a continuous struggle with the imperialist powers to not remove them, because we don't have the military and the weaponry to remove them. So how can we get some policy, what in policy we call policy legroom? What we are looking for is policy legroom to deliver a bit of education, a bit of healthcare, a bit of agriculture before Bill Gates takes over the GMOs and everything else.
Yeah.
So we are in a struggle to try and do a few things for Kenyans before the Americans get all they want. It's a continuous struggle. We are in a struggle.
It's a struggle.
So it's not about a struggle between Sijui Kalenjins and Luyas and Luos and Kikuyu. No. That's foolishness. Do you get what I'm saying?
I am.
Yeah, that is foolishness, because that is not what the problem is. We have to understand who the problem is. The problem with Ruto is that he's just a willing enabler of imperialism and neo-colonialism. He's selling all our parastatals. He's selling all our public investments. He has sold out our minerals.
Gold in Western Kenya.
Gold in Western Kenya. Murima Hills, out there in Kwale, has what we call Niobam.
Oh yeah, I saw that. It's
how many? Do you understand?
Million. It's
about $63 billion worth.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
Which can pay all our debts. So, but you see, Ruto is not part of our struggle to liberate this country. He is an agent of imperial powers who is in office to benefit them and also enrich himself. That's where your corruption dilemma comes in. Corruption, let me put it very easily, corruption is the reward that the Kenyan ruling elite are given by the imperial powers to allow them to expropriate the economy.
Okay.
So corruption is not an accident. It is actually a very well tailored package that you are told, once you give us the economy, military bases, you give us everything that we want, you do your corruption. Do your corruption. And that's why Ruto talks to us the way he talks to us, because he knows that he does these things with impunity. He does not answer to us, he answers to them. And that's why you will see him in some conference in Europe speaking against Russia. Then the following month, he is with Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, that is worse than being an harlot.
Yeah.
That's being worse than being an harlot, isn't it? Because you people just look at you and say, what kind of a person is this? Today you are saying, oh, Russia, please give us fertilizer. Then the following month you are saying, oh, Russia must move out of Ukraine. Then 3 months later, oh, Russia, we support you. You just look that you don't even know what you're doing.
He's trying to get the best of both worlds.
Not best. His commissions, not for Kenya, his wealth. It is about his wealth and the cronies are around him. Yeah. So Kenya is the net loser. And when we are having a conversation about what kind of transition we should do in 2027, then you are told, oh, you know, Kikuyus, oh, you know, Luos, oh, you know, it's Kalenjins, you know, Luyas must do this. And they have positioned all these people that they use, including intellectuals like Mutai Ngunyi, to confuse the people and just change language and bring very interesting figures. What is the census of Luyas? What's the census of Luos? What does that even mean? It's absolutely is nonsense. If you do not understand what, that even being given power will not change anything if you do not have structures and the people who are going to support you to change the Kenyan state. The Kenyan state is the problem. It's a neo-colonial state.
Wow. Now, IMF, I'm very happy. By the way, you mentioned Dedan Kimathi. Yesterday was February 18th. It was
the day it was
his execution.
His execution.
And one thing about the Mau Mau is that I mean, I don't see the reverence we give them. I don't see the respect we give them. I don't see it. You know, like you see other countries, they really revere their heroes. But Kenya, I don't see the reverence we give to the Mau Mau.
You know, in 2022, I saw Kikuyus voting for William Ruto.
Yeah.
And the reason they were voting for him is that he's a born-again Christian. You understand? Yet these Kikuyus are the people who know the struggle that Dedan Kimathi Washori and the Kenya Land and Freedom Alliance was involved in. So there is a problem with the Kenyan education system, is that our education system produces enemies of Kenya. Citizens, 95% of Kenyan citizens are the enemy because they do not know what the Kenyan national interests are. I think we should stop this nonsense of allowing everybody to vote, because unless you understand what you are voting about, you should not be allowed to vote.
Interesting.
How can people vote against their own national interests? How can you vote for an imperial stooge, an agent of foreign interests? How can these people, the reason why Dedan Kimathi's grave cannot be allowed by the 5 presidents. Kimathi's wife demanded that she is not buried until the husband's grave is found. And Ruto and Gachagua claims that he's a Mau Mau, I don't know what nonsense.
Son of Mau Mau.
Son of Mau Mau. It's only Raila who demanded that Kimathi's grave be found before they can bury the wife. This was the wife's wish. They didn't allow that. Why? Because Ruto, like Mwai Kibaki, like Jomo Kenyatta, are all enemies of Kenyans. It is not just Kalenjins who are enemies of Kenya. It is all of them, all the 5. And the 3 of those 5 presidents have been Kikuyu. One a father, the other a son, and then Mwai Kibaki. Mwai Kibaki happens to be Uhuru Kenyatta's godfather, if you know that, at his baptism, Uhuru Kenyatta's baptism. So these are enemies of Kenya. They can't allow us to know where Dedan Kimathi Washori's grave is, because it will become a shrine. It will become a shrine. You've seen what happened in Bonda at Raila's grave.
What happened?
It has become a shrine.
Yeah, it is.
Because that is how you reincarnate the spirit of Mau Mau. If we, because Wafula Buke and I demanded and even bought a billboard and took it to Uhuru Park, because we said Kimathi has to be buried at Uhuru Park, because he's the one who fought for Uhuru. So he has to be buried at a public space, Uhuru Park. His bones must be buried there. Why? so that Kenyans can be able to reincarnate the spirit of freedom. So Kimathi's grave cannot be allowed by these neo-colonial stooges, because the British know. Did you see the red carpet that the king was given last year when he came? How disgraceful was that? I mean, I cried tears, and my children were wondering. I said, this is the greatest insult of the whole of my life. That we can be able to roll out a red carpet for the king who colonized us, yet we do not want to know where Dedan Kimathi Washiori is buried. Because if he's buried in Nyeri, or in Taita Taveta, or in Uhuru Park, that becomes a shrine. And it reignites and unites the Gen Zs to stand up for their country. That is why they can't do that.
And of course,
if you go to countries like, Cuba, everywhere their national hero is buried in the center of the capital city, so that keeps the spirit of revolution going. That's why they can't allow us to bury Dedan Kimathi. And I'm still requesting Wafula Buke and other comrades that we must immediately remove William Ruto from power. We must find Dedan Kimathi's grave, bones, and bury him at Uhuru Park. We must bury him at Uhuru Park. That's why I want to become the governor of Nairobi, so that we can be able to relaunch Nairobi as the place of revolution. The spirit of freeing and liberating Kenya is in Nairobi. And we must recapture it, because this is where the spirit of revolution and Mau Mau is centered and headquartered in Nairobi.
We'll talk about your governor race. By the way, Nairobi's in a mess, but we'll deal with that. But speaking about, you spoke about the IMF. I'd like us to spend some time on the IMF. People don't really understand the IMF and the World Bank and these Bretton Woods institutions. How is the IMF, I know this, but for people who don't know, how is the IMF ruining African countries' economies?
It is very, very simple, actually, except that people want it to look complicated. It's not complicated. So the new way of recolonizing countries is through debt. Because once you lend somebody money, you control the kinds of policies he makes. Because you have to get repaid fast. So every policy in that country has to gear towards repaying you your money. In the IMF, influences how private lenders behave towards you. If you are in bad books with IMF, the private lenders refuse to give you money. So that's how IMF and World Bank become very effective in terms of how they control what I earlier called the policy legroom. Your policy behavior is determined by the IMF policy. So in 2022, March, I think it was March 19th, Uhuru Kenyatta called William Ruto back to State House to sign this IMF document. And the 13-page document said that we must end all subsidies. Remember, we were coming out of COVID.
Yes.
So we didn't have money and we needed to reboot the economy, as it were. And so they were given conditionalities. And that is where the language called fiscal consolidation, fiscal as in F-I-S-C-A-L, fiscal consolidation came. So the state was required to put all the revenue accounts together where IMF can be able to see it. And that is when all these things of schools paying through the citizen pay bill number and the hospitals and the car parks and everybody, that's how that came. So that there is fiscal consolidation. So that IMF can be able to see on the dashboard that you are actually raising the money to pay them. So what happens is that IMF and World Bank will never talk about the problem about Kenyan debt, which is what we call odious debt. odious debt. We now owe both domestic and external lenders. We owe them about 11.8 trillion shillings, which is a lot of money in dollar terms. That is basically a lot of economies in Africa. Is a lot. We owe a lot of money. 11.8 trillion.
Kenyan shillings.
So what happens every year is that we have to borrow to balance the budget, because the deficit, the budget deficit, has been increasing. And I'm simplifying this so for everybody to understand. Because of this continuous borrowing, we cannot do without IMF. Because if IMF does not give us money, we can't even pay salaries. We can't pay salaries. We can't build things. We can't pay for our education. So the budget is so huge, but we don't have the money. Because 70 shillings in every 100 goes towards paying debt. So the whole country remains with 30 shillings out of every 100 to now manage the military, education, the police, healthcare, everything. We can't. So what do? We borrow more. What does that do? It increases the budget deficit for next year. And so we are basically at the mercy of IMF and World Bank, because if they don't give us the money in time, we may not even be able to pay salaries. So what have we done? We are completely at the mercy of these two banks, and they dictate what we do in education. They say, don't pay county governments. Don't pay for healthcare. So what has happened in healthcare? It has been privatized through SHA. And you keep going like that. So that is the power of IMF. And it is not just in Kenya. The situation became so bad in Zambia, in Ethiopia, and in Ghana. They had to do extreme measures had to be undertaken. And that is when, for example, in Ghana, they brought this thing called the haircut. So what happens when a country becomes, goes under debt distress, and the haircut has to be introduced, is that every sovereign, the citizens are the sovereign, must, his bank balance, M-Pesa balance, everything has to be slashed. If it is by 70%, it's by 70%. If it's by 30%, by 30%. So that you secure money, because there's no tax revenue to pay debt. So you have to go to raid the banks of every citizen who are called the sovereign to raise money to pay debt. Because if you don't do that to private lenders, IMF will not give you more money. So what do? You have to allow for the haircut to be introduced, like it was introduced in Ghana. I think it was about 28%. So everybody's bank balance reduced by 28% by the following day morning.
Wow.
Whether it's on M-Pesa, whether it is in the bank account, wherever it is, it has to be slashed. Your next month's salary is going to be less by 30%.
That's a heist.
It is what debt does to countries. That's why we are not independent countries. That's why we don't have any sovereignty, as it were. And that is why America and the imperial powers like France and Britain use these banks to continue with the colonization of African countries. And it is a disaster. That is why African countries cannot make basic decisions. One of the decisions that has completely been compromised is that we cannot industrialize. There's no African country that can industrialize. Because you can't industrialize if 5 things are not in place. I hope you've connected the IMF, lending, internal decisions, and the impact on education, healthcare, industrialization, employment creation. All that cannot happen. For a country to industrialize, there are 5 things you have to do. The first thing is that you have to lower interest rates so that people can access money to invest in machinery, in production. That is not going to be possible if the interest rates are at the place they are in. Kenyans do not know that the interest rate in America is 4%. The interest rate in a lot of European countries is 4.3%. The interest rate in Japan is 3.6. The interest rate in China is 3.7. What's the interest rate in Kenya? 23%. Wow. You must, first of all, deal with the interest rate.
It discourages borrowing.
So that you have to discourage domestic borrowing to lower interest rates. That's the first thing that Mwai Kibaki did. The second thing you have to do is that you have to lower taxes. You cannot tax yourself into growth.
You can't.
The more you increase taxes, the more investors quit, including domestic. Because if you are going to business, you are going to business to do profit. But if the cost of money is 23%, the cost of tax is 40%, that's already 60 what? 63%.
63%.
Of all that you are doing is going to pay debt and pay taxes.
Wow.
Then you have employees to employ and pay. So what are you going to get out of that business? Nothing.
Nothing. There's no
so
profit.
the first thing you do is that you lower interest rates. Number two is that you have to lower taxes. Mm-hmm. You have to totally minimize taxes so that people have the appetite to invest. Number three is that you must completely lower the cost of doing business. Electricity and power is one of the biggest costs of doing business anywhere on earth. Egypt is a desert, but Kenya is the country in Africa with the most costly power. The cost in Kenya is abominable. Nobody can do business here if you are paying a bill, even in domestic, in houses. If you look at what people pay for domestic use, it's abominable.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you may think that you are running a light industry in your house. Yeah, because of the kinds of whatever. So that's number three. You have to lower tax. Number four is that you have to completely crush corruption. All these East Asian countries, China included, and all those countries,
Singapore.
The thing about them is that there is no corruption. Just last week, a billionaire Chinese tech, whatever, was jailed for 20 years. I don't know whether you saw that. Corruption is punished severely. Here, corruption is what
praised.
If you ask, I've South Koreans, I've Japanese, Chinese friends who have come here to invest. And the cost of doing business in the counties is that you are asked for 100 million, 300 million shillings before you set up. So you ask yourself, what's the business of setting up? Dangote came here and he left.
Cement, yeah. I remember.
And they left.
Yeah.
So Kenya is not open to business. This is not a country. A few years ago I said, this is actually not a country. This is a plantation. This is Ruto's plantation on behalf of the foreign masters. We are just working for the 1% ruling class in Kenya and foreign powers and interests. We are just here to pay rent and to work daily, to pay tax and to pay interest rates and to survive in this plantation. This is not a country. It's not an economy. And we have to address these issues. That's number four about corruption.
Corruption. So we have interest rates.
Interest rates, tax. Then you have to deal with the cost of doing business. Then you have to deal with the issue of corruption. Number five, which is important, is that you must invest in education and technical education at that. Massive technical education. So that you have equipped, skilled people who can create things, who can industrialize, who can be able to turn agricultural products into, trade things to export to Europe and all over the place. So our education system is getting worse, not better. It's getting worse, not better. The people are coming out of university and now they are unemployed in their millions. It's a crisis, and we are talking about the African youth bulge. If we do not equip and tool our education so that it can be able to help in industrialization, those are the five things that you have to invest in. The people that you are giving education must have healthcare. They must have housing. They must have food. So that's what we call investing in the people. That's the pillar of investing in the people. But the pillar of investing in the people has to be preceded by the policy on interest rates and access to money. It has to deal with tax policy. It has to deal very directly with the cost of doing business. Number 4, it has to crush corruption before you invest. That's how you raise money to invest in the people.
Yeah.
Once those 5 things are in place, you industrialize next year. That's what we call the industrial policy. But Ruto does not have an industrial policy. What are we discussing? Take Kenyans to become slaves in, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, France, whatnot. And we are here saying this president needs 5 more years because he is so corrupt, because tax policy is dead, because interest rates are high, because corruption is very high, because the cost of doing business is very high, because he has ruined our education and healthcare system. So for that, he really deserves more years. In fact, Atuoli, who is supposed to be the leader of workers, is saying that this guy is so good, we need to remove term limits so that he can become our president perpetually, and so that he can be able to now sell and auction this country to foreign hands. That is the message that is coming from the leader of the trade union, COTU, the Confederation of Central Organization of Trade Unions.
I always hear him and he always says, COTU has to be, next to government. And I'm like, no. If you look at serious trade unions, they actually have to be against government to fight government. I mean, I've never heard a trade union say that we have to be close to government.
It is sickening. On 14th of February, during the, is it called Valentine's Day? During Valentine's Day, we were remembering the death of Morgan Tsvangirai. He died on 14th of February. And Morgan Tsvangirai was actually the Secretary General of the ZCTU, the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, which is our COTU here. And he led ZCTU into forming NCA, the National Constitutional Assembly. And then they formed MDC, the political party, to lead the country to address the economic issues, these 5 things that I've spoken about. That's what Atuoli should be talking about. But Atuoli is not talking about that. He's saying the term limits should be removed. The president who is good, Luyas and these, Kikuyus and that. And you say, how unfortunate are we as Kenya? The country that should be leading the African liberation is the country that has become really the undoing of African liberation. When the countries are moving towards the BRICS, that's what Atuoli should be discussing. Should Kenya join the BRICS or not? What are the cons and the pros of joining BRICS? How do we address the issues of WTO and how it's affecting us? How do we industrialize? Where's the industrialization policy in this country? That is what the trade union should be talking about. But what are we getting? We are actually addressing, we are meeting with Luya leaders to discuss, I don't know what else. Do you see how unfortunate that is?
It's very unfortunate.
It is very, very unfortunate. And that is why we must know, in summary, that Kenya is placed on the eastern gate of Africa, overseeing and overlooking Asia. Asia carries 62% of the global population.
Wow.
62. Africa carries 11% of the global population. So if you put Asia and Africa together, you're talking about 3/4 of the world. Kenya is placed right there at the junction, the eastern gate of Africa. Kenya should be leading the joining of BRICS so that we can be able to do the 5 things that the African Development Bank has recommended. I've said investment in the people, they are called the 5 I's. Investment in the people, infrastructure, institutions, industrialization, and then integration. Those are the 5 things that the Africa Development Bank recommended when Kaberuka was the president of the African Development Bank, that we need to look at these 5 things. Integration of Africa, industrialization, investment in the people, institutions, and then we must talk about infrastructure. So those are the 5 things that Africa must look at. And Kenya should be the conduit. All the roads to Central African Republic, all the railways to Cameroon should be moving from Kenya towards the heartland of Africa. But we are not doing that because we have presidents who have been stooges, whose only interest is to ensure that Kenya remains as a British and American client state, neo-colonial vassal state, which does not industrialize, does not care about its youthful population. Yet we are a very young country. Our median age is 19.6.
Wow.
We are one of the youngest countries on earth. The median age for Africa is 19 point something. Like Kenya is 19.6. The US is 38, which is twice our age in terms of their median.
Twice, actually.
Europe is 42 years.
More than twice.
Japan is the oldest population in the world. They are at 48. Their median age is at 48%. So you see, you are dealing with a population of billions of African young people. Instead of talking industrialization, instead of talking about liberation, you are talking about, how we can be able to get IMF, whatever, how to disinvest from education, how to privatize healthcare, how to bring British army to operate in Kenya, to create American bases in Kenya. Do you see that we have a fundamental problem here, which cannot be solved through these tribal coalitions that are going on in Kenya? So that is really the centrality of IMF in our suffering.
Wow. Let's shift gears to local now. You're running for Nairobi governor.